In this video, I want to look at enlightenment as a concept in the Eastern wisdom tradition. I will argue that several misunderstandings put it on a supernatural pedestal way out of reach of ordinary mortals, and that hinders rather than helps people realize that we all actually live within the embrace of enlightenment. Not only that, but it is a natural consequence and part of our evolution as humans. As usual, I approach this topic from a strictly natural rather than supernatural perspective, so it's a variety of the Buddhist tradition that best suits my rational 21st century mind, a practical path that can be trod without relying on supernatural explanations, and which is consistent with science and our reality as evolving beings. But any serious discussion of Buddhism has a lot of ground clearing to do. This is because many of its key concepts like reincarnation, karma, enlightenment, meditation are all now so widely used in popular culture with a heap of misconceptions based on half-truths, exaggerations and sensational claims. Enlightenment, also called nirvana, satori, awakening, realization, is one of the terms that sets a very high bar of spiritual expectation. Gautama, the man himself, who incidentally explicitly claimed his non-divinity, realized that humans tend to worship charismatic people. He warned his followers against venerating him and blindly following his words simply because he had said them. He was a radical empiricist and said, accept only ideas after you've tested them for yourself. But as with Christ, as soon as he was dead, he was written up with divine attributes. But his core business was simple and secular, to give people the contentment they craved for by showing them how to understand the reality, the cause, and the removal of life's unsatisfactoriness, dukkha. And his method was equally simple, unstinting attention in a life of loving kindness. And to put this into more evolutionary concepts, he was teaching how to fully mobilize the latest modules to emerge in our evolutionary kit, a reflective consciousness, and how to use this to override the turmoil of emotional reactivity that nature uses to drive us to do her bidding, which is to go forth and multiply. Until now, this has been our evolutionary program, experienced as archetypally unconscious behavior. But now we are moving off autopilot and taking conscious charge. It's not an easy transition. Anyway, he predicted that his program for this transition, which he called awakening, would be degraded by emotional religiosity over the millennia, as people became less and less interested in the demanding message and more in the man. So what is this so-called enlightenment? And what are these misunderstandings that lead us from rather than towards the goal? Early translations of nirvana as extinction or snuffing out, or ceasing the cycle of rebirths. These ideas are hopelessly misleading, negative and unhelpful, especially to the modern mind, not steeped in Eastern traditions like emptiness and no soul, for example. It does bear fruit if it is understood metaphorically, as a sort of asymptote which our life approaches when we are progressively giving more focused attention to our nature and kindness to others. We simply leave behind the preoccupation of the self. The ego tends to be snuffed out, in a manner of speaking. Buddhism divides at this point. The original or Theravadan branch, still dominant in Southeast Asia, was replaced in India and North Asia by the Mahayana schools which developed the Bodhisattva concept. For them, compassion made full personal escape from dukkha impossible, while the unawakened were still suffering. The Bodhisattva concept is in fact a beautiful metaphor of boundless compassion that enshrines the experience that people on the path have of the transcendent numinous support they find in their practice. But the Bodhisattva concept is also misleading when interpreted literally. It then suggests a model of enlightenment as a state of bliss, paranormal powers or heavenly realms, and it lets in all sorts of religious nonsense, veneration of relics in order to gain merit, healing, fortune-telling, but worst of all, giving one's personal responsibility for awakening over to someone else. In order to describe the breakthrough of consciousness that we experience as we awaken to things as they really are, over-the-top metaphorical descriptions are made that make nirvana seem infinitely beyond everyday mundane awareness. This quantum leap of awareness is presented as so extreme that it is infinitely hard to attain, and is far too removed from everyday life. And the stories of it taking thousands of lives to attain only makes this worse. But in fact, life itself, if we are attentive and strive to see things as they really are, delivers these little awakenings, little nirvanas, with increasing frequency. But for most of us, without mind exercise, these evaporate again. They're not stable. But on the other hand, if this process is supported by a practice of meditation which strengthens our attentiveness, the moments grow and become more and more stable. It's not rocket science, it just takes work. The ideal of an awakened being is more problematic. Don't worry about these absolutes, and just capture, cultivate and stabilize your own awakened moments. You are that. So with enlightenment, there are no skyrockets, but a delight in the perfection and rightness of the world, be it an opening lotus flower or a rotting corpse. An attention which is steady, bomb-proof, undistracted by the concern with self. An attention that is free to penetrate the moment-by-moment events of here and now, so deeply that everything appears newer, more alive, fresher, and as full and deep and rewarding as anything we can imagine. There are no miraculous healings, but increased health gained from a stress-free life where acceptance rather than warfare is the default setting as we walk through the world. No paranormal powers, but normal powers of a balanced mind meeting authentically whatever arises. That may seem superhuman to those still caught up in the daily battle for survival. Still, there is trouble and pain. Bad things still happen. But rather than stewing over them, the awakening person moves perspective rapidly and can empathize and feel compassion even to someone who would do them harm, without fear or anger. Problems don't stop, but they do stop being problems. And the practice doesn't stop when the goal is won. The goal is won when the practice is normal life. It's about everything changing because of the way it is looked at. A perspective that overrides the evolutionary hardwired circuitry of fear, defense, aggression. So it is a major job to do the rewiring, but this is the Buddhist program. You may be wondering what the pictures I have been shown have to do with this topic. These magic eye pictures, as they're called, are a pretty good analogy to spiritual awakening. Until the image is viewed a certain way, it looks just like any other picture. But when the knack of looking the right way is mastered, the true three-dimensional glory of what has always been there is seen. The change is not in the object seen, but totally in the way it has been seen. With practice, you'll see this if you look at these images from about 12 to 18 inches and cross your eyes through a point halfway down. Just persevere. Another analogy of the idea of enlightenment comes from the Western tradition and illustrates that heaven, awakening, and hell, remaining an illusion, is a matter of perspective. And this is the story. One night a man had a dream, and in the dream an angel comes and takes him on a tour of heaven and hell. First they visit hell. It turns out that hell, surprisingly enough, is a huge banquet room with tables full of all food and drink that one could possibly want. The people at the tables, however, are angry and frustrated, rude, despairing, depressed, stressed, thin, emaciated, wasting away. The silverware in hell is about 4 feet long and can only be picked up at one end. Thus all these people, who are interested only in feeding themselves, are unable to do so. They are unable to manage the 4-foot utensils in such a way that they can bring the food to their mouths. The man and the angel then leave hell and go and visit heaven. It turns out that heaven, surprisingly enough, is also an identical huge banquet room with tables full of all the food and drink you could possibly want. The people in heaven, though, are joyful, happy, content, engaged, and manifest a healthy sense of well-being. The silverware is exactly the same as in hell, 4 feet long, and can only be picked up from one end. The difference? Here in heaven, the people are reaching across the table and feeding each other.